Hi everyone, and I'm very grateful to have been invited to speak today. It's a great privilege to be at the conference. I think the topic of the conference is vitally important. It's vitally important for vegans and animal liberationists because the climate crisis and adverse human impact on the environment is a huge cause of the oppression of other animals. Billions of wild animals are dying at this moment because of the climate crisis and other harmful human impact on the environment. So it's vital that we do our utmost to combat that. And it's important to remember that that speciesism and human supremacism are really the root cause of the climate crisis. For instance, animal farming is a huge contributor to global heating. It's often said that it's 15% to blame for the climate crisis and for global heating. But it could very well be a lot more than that. For instance, there's a paper by a group called Climate Healers that's come to the conclusion that animal agriculture is actually responsible for 87% of global heating. And the reason for that is because they've taken into account not just the emissions produced by animal farming, but also the fact that if there was no animal farming, if human society adopted a vegan diet, it would mean that so much land could go back to the wild. So much land could be returned to forest, and that would pull down a huge amount of carbon from the atmosphere. And so it's the loss of that through animal farming that is also taken into account, and that creates a much greater figure than is generally recognised. And industrialised fishing, of course, is another a really big contributor to global heating. It's more than the aircraft industry. It's more than all flying, and that's in terms of the emissions, and also in terms of the damage done to the ocean. Once again, preventing the ocean from drawing carbon out of the atmosphere. And the other thing to remember, the other big cause, of course, of the climate crisis is the burning of fossil fuels, and that really began in a big way with the industrialization, the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. And of course, at the time, people didn't know that all this burning of fossil fuels would end up with us having a climate crisis, would cause global heating. But what they did know was that the industrialization was causing pollution, was causing habitat destruction, and that was causing huge suffering and slaughter to other animals. Because they didn't care, because it was, and as it still is sadly, a speciesist society where human interests were put above that of other animals. And so for those two reasons, really, speciesism is a root cause of the climate crisis. And just as speciesism is the root cause of the climate crisis, really fighting speciesism, combating human supremacism is a fundamental way in which we combat the climate crisis. And basically that means educating people to become vegan, educating people to adopt a vegan diet so that we can put an end to animal farming, industrialized fishing. That would cause that would cause a huge reduction in the carbon in the atmosphere. But also in terms of all other ways in which humans impact adversity on the environment, including the burning of fossil fuels, in a society that was at least controlled by vegans, where protecting other animals, where animal liberation was a priority. All those other issues of harm to the environment would be dealt with as well, and the climate crisis would be brought to an end. And so we have to educate as many people as possible to become vegan. And because the people who need to do that education. In fact, the only people who can do that education are existing vegans. And one of the problems we have is that there are so many more people today, really in every country in the world, who are vegan, far more than ever before. But only a tiny percentage of those vegans are activists. Only a tiny percentage of those vegans are actually involved in outreach to educate other people to become vegan. And that's very sad, because it's great when somebody becomes vegan, they're no longer involved themselves in consuming animal products. They try not to be involved in any way in other forms of animal oppression. And that's great. But then the question is, what about all those other people that are still involved in those things, that are still contributing to the oppression of other animals? And something has to be done to educate those people. And so therefore, we need as many vegans as possible to become educators. Because it's not just a question of changing people's lifestyles. You know, if we can educate people, persuade people to adopt the vegan lifestyle, then their impact through their own lives on the environment, their harmful impact, will be greatly reduced. But also, we can change those people politically. We can change those people in terms of who they vote for. And of course, the more people we educate to become vegan, the more vegan politicians we have, because a percentage of those vegans want to be politicians, and we'll have more vegans to vote for those politicians. So we can completely change the political landscape. We can elect administrations that care properly about animals, that want to bring about animal liberation, you know, that want to move us towards a society where animal products aren't consumed, and who want to properly combat the climate crisis. And so we need more vegans to be educators. And basically, what I'd say to people is, listening to this, obviously, if you're not vegan, then go vegan. Adopt a vegan diet and go vegan. That's the single most important thing you can do to protect the planet. There was some research carried out at Oxford University here in England in 2018 that came to that conclusion. The single best thing anyone can do to protect the planet is to adopt a vegan diet. So that's very important. If you're not vegan, go vegan. If you are vegan but you're not an activist, become an activist. You know, get involved with other people and actively spread the vegan message. And if you're not an activist, if you're an activist but you're not an organizer, then become an organizer, and become an organizer and an instigator of vegan outreach in your own local area. Because I think one of the difficulties we have at the moment with vegan outreach is that most of it takes place in the centre of big cities. People go to the centre of big cities from the surrounding area and carry out outreach there, and that's great. It's great that that's happening, but it's not enough. We need vegan outreach everywhere. And we need it as often as possible. We need it in not just in the centre of big cities. We need it in smaller cities, in towns, and in the suburbs of big cities. And I say to everyone who's a vegan activist, think about what you can do in your own local area to spread the message there. And there are lots of ways people can do that. People can do it as individuals. People can leave vegan leaflets on public transport, in public places. Put them in books in libraries, inside magazines. Those are all things I do locally. And also they can deliver leaflets to people's homes. It's something we call door dropping, where we put leaflets through people's letterboxes. And people can do that as individuals. But as a group, just with 2 or 3 other vegans, you can do a lot more. You can do information stores, for instance. I mean, I do small information stores just for myself sometimes, but obviously anything larger, it's very useful to have more people. So in a local area, somebody who's a vegan organizer can recruit other local vegans and do some of those larger forms of outreach. And so what I'd really say in conclusion, I'm hoping that there'll be lots of questions afterwards, is once again, if you're not vegan, go vegan. If you're vegan but not an activist, become an activist. If you're not an activist but if you're an activist but not an organizer, become an organizer of outreach and become an organizer in your local area. And the other thing that's really important, and something we've done locally, is make alliances with local environmental groups and work with them and become involved with them. Now, those people may not be doing it for the same reason we're doing it. They can be very human-centric, not really be bothered about other animals, that they want to protect the environment, they want to end the climate crisis because of the effect on humans. And so then not really doing it for the same reason as us, but nevertheless, what they're campaigning for is going to help other animals and is going to help other animals in a big way. Because the climate crisis and other forms of environmental destruction, the main victims of those things aren't humans. They're other animals. I mean, humans, can and do suffer terribly because of these things, obviously, but the impact on other animals is much greater. So it's important to work with those groups, and locally minded, local vegan group. We're part of the Green Alliance. And because that, we're able to hold stalls at local environmental events, where we obviously are talking very much about the importance of a vegan diet to spread the message. So if we can do all those things, if we can, if we become active and spread the vegan message as much as we possibly can, we can. We can properly combat the climate crisis, and we can bring about animal liberation. Thank you. I think those are desperate measures by the animal agriculture industry to somehow make animal farming more acceptable, but they're I mean, in two ways. In two ways, it's not good. I mean, first of all, those animals are still going to be sent for slaughter. They're still going to suffer. So it's not going to help those individual animals at all. And secondly, the main problem with animal farming kind of isn't the emissions. The main problem with animal farming in terms of the climate crisis is the amount of land it takes up. The amount of land it takes up in terms of the land that the animals actually live on, and the land that's used to grow food for those animals. And so if those animals weren't farmed, all that land could be returned to nature. All that land could go back to forest, and that would draw down a huge amount of carbon from the atmosphere. So really, it's not dealing those small measures like trying to reduce the emissions from cows. Don't provide a solution. I think in terms of vegan outreach, what we have to remember is people need to feel that they have made the decision themselves to go vegan. So I think what's important is providing people with information so they can make that decision, and providing information to people as often as possible. All of us who became vegan because we received information. I mean, I became vegan after reading an article in a magazine. A lot of people I know became vegan after receiving a leaflet. More recently, it's often a video that someone's watched on YouTube, for instance. There's all sorts of ways, and sometimes people need to receive that information several times and from different sources before they decide to go vegan. So it's very important that we put out as much information as possible in many different forms. And I think it's also important to kind of be friendly and be I suppose to be kind in a sense when we're trying to educate people to go vegan, because if we start shouting at people, if we get angry with people, that's likely to make them resistant. that's likely to make them not want to listen to our message. And it can be very frustrating sometimes, talking to people, the kind of ridiculous sort of excuses they put forward why they have to carry on eating meat, for instance. But I think it's really important to be patient and not to get angry, because if we become angry, then that actually is going to make it more difficult for that message to eventually be received by that person. So that's why I say it's really the calm distribution of information as much as we possibly can, I think, is the way forward. Well, if somebody is just a vegan in terms of what they avoid, in other words, they're avoiding consuming animal products, and they'd be avoiding other things, like they wouldn't attend animal circuses, they wouldn't attend animal racing, they try not to contribute money to organisation that funded animal experiments, and they wouldn't wear fur or leather or all these things. It's all about avoidance. It's all about avoiding things, and that's great. It's great. It's great that people are avoiding those things, but you see, that's really only doing what we shouldn't be doing anyway. We shouldn't be doing any of those things anyway. We shouldn't be consuming animal products anyway, you see. So in a sense, it's not really a situation of being good. It's kind of a situation of being neutral, where we're refusing to be bad. We're refusing to do the bad things, right? But refusing to do bad things isn't the same as doing good things. If you see what I mean, neutral isn't the same as being positive, and so it's great that people are avoiding all these all these things that harm animals. That's absolutely brilliant. But the question is, what about all those other people that are still continuing to do those things? The people that are continuing to consume animal products, the people that are continuing to contribute to all these other forms of animal oppression. We have to, if we're going to ever achieve animal liberation, we've got to change those people as well, or we've got to change a sufficient number of them, so that we're the people that are kind of so that we're in charge in a way, so that we're the people that it's people like us that kind of form the government, and it's people like us that pass the laws. You see, we have to create enough vegans in order to enable us to do that, and that's a lot more vegans than we've got now. And so if you really want animal liberation, and if someone the reason why someone goes vegan, in terms of the proper definition of veganism, is because they care about animal liberation, and they want animals to be free from oppression by humans, and they don't want to contribute to that. Now, if someone is in that position, surely they want animal liberation to come about. They want all animals to be free from oppression, and the only way to do that, if we want to do that, we have to educate a lot of other people to go vegan. And the only people who can do that is vegans, are vegans. And so we all need to play our part in that. And it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be anything that that's risky, or that's noisy, or that's loud. We can do that. All of us can do that in really quite a simple and peaceful and quiet way, just by distributing information, by giving out leaflets, by holding holding information stalls, helping at those stalls. We can all do something, and all of us have some spare time. Obviously, everyone has got things going on in their lives that they've got to deal with first, their family issues and their work, for instance. But everyone has some spare time, and what I ask of all vegans is they use at least some of that spare time to spread the vegan message.